"Please don't leave me here. I'll reward you. I'll do whatever you ask," said the young girl to the lonely rancher for years. Wyoming Territory, winter, 1868. The wind cut through the pine forest like a knife. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, swallowing everything in white silence. The trees stood like frozen sentinels, and the world felt like it had stopped breathing. Somewhere deep in the wilderness near Willow Creek, a lone rider made his way through the storm. Elijah Hart, wrapped in a heavy wool coat and slouched low in his saddle, guided his tired horse down a barely visible trail. His face was weathered and stern, eyes sharp but shadowed with something old and haunted. On his back he carried a rifle, on his belt a Colt. But he rode not for war, not for law, only for meat and peace. A fresh trail caught his eye, hoofprints in the snow, sloppy, unsteady, and recent. He slowed his horse and followed the signs around a bend until he saw it. A small buckboard wagon lay on its side, wheels cracked, axle shattered. One horse, already frozen, slumped in the harness, eyes glassy. The reins were tangled in pine roots. Elijah dismounted slowly, the snow crunching under his boots as he approached. Then he heard it, a faint voice, barely audible beneath the wind. He stepped around the back of the wagon and froze. There, half buried in snow and wrapped in a torn blanket, lay a girl. No older than 19, skin the soft brown of river clay, hair black as coal, soaked and tangled with ice. Her lips were blue and her eyes fluttered beneath heavy lids. Her voice came again, a broken whisper, desperate and raw. "Please, don't leave me here. I'll do anything you want. Anything." Ugh. Elijah stood still, breath caught in his throat. The girl trembled, arms curled in close like a dying bird. Her cheeks were scratched, and one boot was missing. She looked like she'd been thrown there, or left. He clenched his jaw and took a step back. "Not my problem." He looked up. The snow was coming down harder now. If he left her, she would not last another hour. But the echo of her voice, "Please, anything you want." He turned, headed toward his horse. But the ghost of another voice filled his mind, younger, clearer. A child's laugh, a woman's lullaby, then screams, gunfire, smoke. His hand tightened on the reins. He turned back around. The girl was still there, her body now coated with a soft, white layer. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. Her eyes opened briefly and locked on his. She looked straight at him and whispered again, barely a breath, "Please." Elijah exhaled sharply. "Damn it," he muttered. He moved fast now, dropping to his knees beside her. She didn't flinch when he touched her. She was barely conscious. He slid his arms beneath her, she was so light it startled him, and lifted her into his chest. Her skin was ice. "Stay with me," he said low, almost angrily. "You hear me? You freeze on me, I swear to God." She said nothing, but her head fell against his chest. He carried her back to his horse, awkwardly mounted with her cradled in one arm, and nudged the animal into motion. The cabin was still a mile out, tucked in the woods above the ridge. Each step felt like a reckoning. Inside the cabin, Elijah kicked the door open, snow swirling behind him. He laid her gently on the cot near the fireplace, then worked fast, building a fire, stripping off her wet clothes down to the essentials, wrapping her in furs. She moaned once, eyes still fluttering. He poured a bit of whiskey between her lips. She coughed, weak, but swallowed. "That's it," he said. He sat back on the floor, staring into the fire, hands resting on his knees. His eyes drifted to her face again. "Comanche," he muttered under his breath. "Half-blood, maybe." He didn't ask where she came from. He didn't care. He only knew one thing. He'd heard that voice before, in another life, in another blizzard, when he hadn't been fast enough or strong enough, or there in time. This time, he had been, and he wasn't walking away. The storm raged for 3 more days. Inside the modest log cabin tucked beneath the pines, time moved slower than the snow falling outside. The fire cracked constantly, fighting back the cold that seeped through every gap in the timber walls. Shadows danced across the worn floor, across the rifle propped near the door, across the figure on the cot. Maya Redbird lay wrapped in thick furs, barely moving. Her skin had regained some color, but fever still clung to her like a second skin. Her lips twitched now and then. Sometimes she cried out, sometimes whispered in a language Elijah recognized but did not speak. Comanche. He sat nearby, silent, carving wood with a small knife. He kept glancing over, his eyes unreadable. On the second night, she muttered something that made him freeze. Teasil tu, namina nahukus. Elijah's brow furrowed. He knew enough to recognize it wasn't nonsense. She wasn't just dreaming, she was calling for someone. A mother? A father? He didn't ask. He stood, walked to the small trunk at the foot of his bed and opened it slowly. Inside was a neatly folded gray wool sweater, thinned with time but carefully kept. He picked it up, stared at it for a long moment. It still smelled faintly of lavender and smoke. He exhaled, walked over, and gently draped it across Maya's body, tucking the edges around her. The movement was careful, reverent, like placing flowers on a grave. She didn't stir. By the fourth morning, the fever began to break. Elijah was feeding logs into the stove when he heard her shift behind him. He turned and saw her eyes flutter open, squinting against the low light. Her lips were cracked, but she managed to whisper. "Where?" "You're in the mountains," he said. "Cabin's mine." Her brow twitched. She tried to sit up but winced in pain. He stepped over, handed her a cup of water. She took it with shaking hands. "You found me," she said. "I did." "You didn't leave me." She looked down at the sweater wrapped around her. Her fingers traced the fabric gently. "This yours?" "No," Elijah said. Then, after a pause, "Was my wife's." Maya looked up sharply, then lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry. You didn't know." She took a slow sip, then leaned back against the wall, breath ragged. A long silence passed. Then she saw it, the scar on his shoulder. Pale, jagged, unmistakably old. A bullet wound, maybe more than one. She nodded toward it. "You were in the war?" Elijah didn't answer right away. He pulled the chair closer, sat down, eyes never leaving hers. "I was in a lot of things," he said. She stared a moment longer, then asked softly, "Did no one come for you?" His expression didn't change, but something in his jaw tightened. There was no one left to come. Her eyes stayed on him, studying his silence. And he let her. That night, when Maya finally fell into real sleep for the first time, Elijah stayed near the fire. He glanced over at her now and then, and though he did not speak it, something old and buried deep inside him stirred, something he thought had died long ago with the woman whose sweater now warmed another soul. Not pity, not yet trust, but something that felt dangerously close to hope. The snow had melted just enough to reveal mud and hoofprints. Late one morning, as the chill clung to the trees but the sun finally pierced the sky, Elijah heard the distant thud of horses approaching. Not the heavy rhythm of a rancher's trail ride. This was military, precise, measured. He stepped out from the cabin, eyes narrowed, rifle cradled in his arms. 4 men in Union blue rode up the path. Worn uniforms, rifles slung over shoulders. One wore an officer's coat and carried the smugness of authority. His name was Lieutenant Franklin, and he tipped his hat without smiling. "Morning," he said. Elijah gave a nod. "Name's Franklin. You Elijah Hart?" "I am." "Mind if we ask a few questions?" Elijah didn't move. "You can ask." Franklin gestured behind him. "We're tracking a fugitive, young woman, half-breed Comanche. Name's Maya Redbird." Elijah's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed calm. "Not a name I know." Franklin's eyes scanned the cabin. "We've reason to believe she's in this area. Escaped from a wagon 2 days ago. Accomplices with known Comanche raiders. Her father's Red Hawk. Your papers might know him as a negotiator. We call him a traitor." Behind Elijah, inside the cabin, Maya was crouched low near the fireplace, holding her breath. Elijah stood firm. "This land's quiet. Nobody comes this far without losing something." Franklin dismounted. "Mind if we take a look around?" "I do." The soldiers exchanged glances. Franklin stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You were a Confederate, weren't you, Hart? Records say you rode with McAllister's ghosts. Did time at Andersonville. Lost your family in the Cheyenne breakout." Elijah said nothing. "You've already buried enough ghosts," Franklin continued. "This girl's not worth joining them." Elijah's stare was cold as the ridge behind him. "You're welcome to look through the woods," he said, "but this cabin's mine." Franklin studied him, but something in Elijah's stillness, that subtle hum of danger beneath his calm, made the officer hesitate. "We'll be back," he said finally, and mounted up. "If she's here and you're hiding her, you'll burn with her." They rode off. As soon as they were out of sight, Elijah stepped inside and locked the door behind him. Maya stood up slowly. Her face was pale. "You knew?" Elijah didn't answer right away. He walked to a corner of the cabin, opened a hidden trap door beneath the old rug. Beneath it, a ladder leading to a narrow root cellar, lined with stone, dry and dark. "Get in." Maya stared. "What is this?" Elijah's voice was flat. "Somewhere they won't find you." Maya descended the ladder without another word. As she reached the bottom, her foot hit something hard. Wooden crosses, half buried in the dirt. 3 of them. Small, weather-worn. She looked up. "Who?" Elijah's voice caught. "My wife, my little boy, my daughter." Maya closed her eyes. He didn't say anything more, just pulled the trap door shut, locking it with the iron latch. Outside, the wind picked up again. That evening, as Elijah stood outside splitting wood, Franklin returned, alone this time. He dismounted slowly, arms crossed. "You sure there's no one else up here?" he asked. Elijah didn't blink. "Just me." Franklin looked around, then up at the smoke curling from the chimney. "Hard place to survive," he said. "Lonely, cold. Ghosts like it that way." Franklin tilted his head. "You believe in ghosts, Hart?" Elijah looked him dead in the eye. "Only ones I've buried." Franklin let out a dry chuckle. Then he leaned in slightly. "If you're hiding her, she'll bring nothing but death. You know that." Elijah's voice was quiet, steel-wrapped. "Only thing living out here is snow and ghosts. And they ain't talking." Franklin stared a moment longer, then nodded once and left. Down in the root cellar, Maya sat in silence beside the old crosses, her fingers tracing the carved initials. She understood now. He was not saving her because she was innocent. He was saving her because once, no one had saved them. The frost had begun to loosen its grip on the mountain. Each morning, the ice on the creek behind the cabin cracked a little more. The snowbanks shrank, and the sun stayed just a few moments longer above the pines. Spring was still far off, but it was trying, and so was Maya. Her strength returned gradually. She began to walk without leaning on furniture. She helped feed the fire. She even smiled once when Elijah accidentally spilled coffee on his own boot and cursed under his breath. But there was something else. Every afternoon, when Elijah would ride out to check the traps or hunt, Maya would slip outside. Just beyond the clearing, hidden among the trees, she would break small twigs and arrange them carefully on the ground in strange patterns, barely noticeable to most, but they weren't random. They were messages. To anyone from her tribe who might still be looking or watching. She left 4 of them over the course of a week. On the 5th day, Elijah saw one. It was subtle, a row of pine needles bent in half and pinned under a flat stone. No animal had done it, no wind had placed it there. He stared at it for a long while, then glanced into the trees beyond. Then he turned and walked back to the cabin. That evening, while Maya chopped herbs near the window, Elijah sat sharpening a blade at the table. The silence was heavy. He did not look at her. Finally, he spoke. "You think they'll come?" She stopped moving. He set down the blade. "Your people. You're leaving signals." She turned, her eyes suddenly tight with fear, or shame, or both. He didn't raise his voice. "You think I won't help you?" She searched for words. "I had to try. I could not know if you would. You've been here weeks," he said quietly. "I fed you, hid you, nearly got myself hung, and still, you don't trust me?" She looked down, her fingers shaking now. "It is not about you," she said. "It is about the world I've known, the men who say they'll help, the ones who smile when they steal. I've seen too many promises melt like snow." She paused. "I have never trusted anyone who lived long enough to deserve it." Her voice cracked on the last word. Elijah stood slowly, walked to the door, and picked up his coat. He did not speak. She watched him leave without slamming the door. He returned an hour later, holding a small cedar board and his hunting knife. He walked past her without a word, knelt near the central support beam of the cabin, and began carving. The sound of blade against wood filled the room. Maya stood and approached slowly. On the beam, faded but legible, were two names already carved. Clara Hart, and a heart. Beneath them now, Elijah carved a third. Maya Redbird. He finished, wiped the wood dust with his sleeve, and stood. "I buried the first two," he said. "That's why their names are here, to keep them close." He looked at her. "I do not plan on burying you." She blinked, stunned. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to," he said. "You're here, that's enough." Her voice was barely a whisper. "No one has ever written my name in a home before." He nodded once, then returned to his seat. And for the first time since she had arrived, Maya sat beside him, not across the room, not watching from the corner, but close enough to feel the warmth of the same fire. The fire crackled, casting flickering light across the snow-dusted ground. Elijah and Maya sat beneath the trees behind the cabin, a few feet apart but sharing the same hush of the mountain night. The moon hung low over the ridge, spilling silver light onto the earth. Coyotes howled somewhere in the distance, mournful and wild. Maya pulled her blanket tighter. The wind carried a bite. "You do this often?" she asked quietly. Elijah nodded. "Helps me remember who I was. Before everything broke." She stared into the flames. "And who were you?" "A husband, a father." He paused. That was enough. They sat in silence. Then Maya spoke, her voice low. "I lied to you." Elijah glanced over, waiting. "I wasn't just running from soldiers. I was exchanged, a prisoner. My own people gave me up. Said it was a gesture of goodwill. Half-blood daughter of Red Hawk. Useful, but not worth protecting." Elijah didn't speak. "I spent 6 months in a fort," she continued. "They called me insurance. When talks broke down, they left me in the snow. I was nothing. Not Comanche, not American, just forgotten." Her hands clenched around the blanket. "I hate them all. Soldiers, chiefs, men who make promises and leave girls like me to rot between their politics." Still no response. She looked up at him. "Sometimes I think I was born only to be traded." "You weren't," Elijah said, voice steady. She let out a bitter laugh. "How would you know?" "Because you're still fighting." Their eyes met across the fire. Something unspoken passed between them. Then Elijah leaned forward, staring into the flames. "There was a man named Tanner Pike," he said. "We were boys together, rode trails, fought the war side by side." He rubbed his chin. "After the war, he turned outlaw. Robbed a train I was supposed to be on. My wife and children were riding it instead. I watched the smoke rise." Maya's breath caught. "You saw it?" "Too late," he said. "By the time I got there, there was nothing left." He sat back, weary. "I tracked Pike across 4 states. Had a shot once, couldn't take it. He just smiled and said, 'They were cargo, Hart. You cannot carry cargo forever.'" Maya whispered, "He's the one after me." Elijah nodded. "Not for you, for your father. You're the bait." Silence again. Maya asked softly, "Do you wish you'd killed him?" Elijah hesitated. I do not believe in killing easy, but some men don't deserve breath. She looked down, her hand resting on her knee. Slowly, Elijah reached out and placed his hand over hers, rough, scarred, calloused. She didn't pull away. I used to think, she whispered, that no one understood what it meant to be thrown away by the people who should have protected you. She looked at him. But maybe I was wrong. Elijah nodded once, quietly. Maybe we were just waiting to find each other. The fire burned low, the night deepened. Their hands stayed joined in the quiet, not as a promise, but as truth. The decision was made at dawn. The sky above the mountains was a bruised purple, still caught between night and morning, when Elijah saddled his last horse, a powerful chestnut stallion named Flint. The animal had been with him for nearly 10 years, through war, winter, and wandering. Selling him would hurt more than any bullet ever had. But he did it anyway. He rode Flint down the mountain trail to the small trading post on the edge of Ash Creek. The town was barely a cluster of buildings, a saloon, a feed store, a stable, and one old church that had not heard a sermon since Lincoln died. Yet even here, eyes followed Elijah as he entered. Men leaned off porches, women hushed their children. The name Hart still meant something, even after all these years. When Elijah emerged from the stable an hour later, Flint was gone, traded to a cattleman heading east. In his pocket were gold coins and a signed letter from the town's banker, collateral against Elijah's own land. He had wagered everything, horse, home, and the future of Willow Creek Ranch. By the time he returned to the cabin, snow flurries had begun to fall again. Spring was taking its time. Maya was waiting by the fire when he stepped inside. She saw the absence first, no reins in his hands, no familiar hoofbeats behind him. You sold him, she said. He didn't deny it. He set down a bag of supplies on the table and removed his coat. I made arrangements, he said. We leave tomorrow night, Colorado lines about 3 days south if the weather holds. He stepped forward, voice rising. You sold your horse? And the land? I gave what I had to buy us time. This is your home, she whispered. You built it. You carved names into the walls. This is all you have left. Elijah met her gaze, steady and firm. I once thought that too. He moved past her, pouring coffee into a tin cup, then paused, his back half turned. But homes are just wood, just dirt. I can build another. She stepped closer. Why would you give up everything for me? He turned now. The fire cast shadows across his face. Not hard shadows, but warm, softened by something old and sacred. Because I already lost the ones I loved, he said quietly. Because when I heard you whisper in that snow, I heard their voices too, and I knew. If I walked away again, I'd never stop hearing them. Her throat tightened. You do not even know if I will survive out there. I do not need to know. He set the cup down. He need to try. Silence stretched between them. Maya blinked quickly, then looked away, pacing toward the window. Outside, the wind blew across the treetops. She saw the edge of the barn, the place where Elijah had buried his family beneath pine crosses. You said once, ghosts liked it up here. They still do. She turned back. Then why leave? He stepped forward, voice lower now, almost tender. Because maybe it is time to stop living among the dead. A long breath passed between them. And then, slowly, Maya stepped forward. She rested her hand against his chest. Just for a moment. Not a kiss, not a promise, but something just as powerful. Later that night, while Elijah slept in the rocking chair near the fire, Maya walked to the beam in the center of the cabin. Her fingers brushed over the names carved there. Clara, Anna, Maya. And beneath it, with the tip of her knife, she etched one more word. Alive. Because that was what Elijah had given her. An escape. Not pity, but the chance to live, and to be more than what the world tried to use or discard. The storm might still come, but now, at least, they would ride into it together. They reached the Colorado border by dusk on the fourth day. Elijah had been cautious, guiding them through back trails and wooded ravines. The route was treacherous, and they moved mostly at night, avoiding roads and any signs of life. The further south they traveled, the more Maya seemed to breathe again, like the mountains were finally releasing their grip on her lungs. But danger had never stopped tracking them. It came on the wind like smoke. They were less than 5 miles from safe territory when the ambush came. Elijah heard the sound first, a faint snap of twigs in the trees. He turned too late. Shots rang out, a flash of red scarf in the trees. Maya screamed. Men on horseback thundered down the ridge. Elijah fired twice, dropping one, but it was over in moments. They took Maya, left Elijah face down in the mud, blood trickling from a gash on his head. By nightfall, he had tracked them. Tanner Pike's camp sprawled in the ruins of an abandoned mining town, stone walls broken, windows shattered, a place once full of hope, now ruled by lawless ghosts. His men had set up fires and tents, their rifles leaning against crates of stolen whiskey. And in the center of it all, tied to a wooden post, bruised but defiant, was Maya. Pike sat in a rocking chair across from her, one boot propped on a barrel. A half-burnt cigar hung from his teeth. His grin was crooked as ever. "You know, I never thought I'd catch you clean," he said. "But here we are." Maya said nothing. He leaned forward. "Your father will come for you, and if he does not, the cowboy will." Her jaw tightened. Pike chuckled. "I never could figure that one out. What's she to you, Hart? A debt? A distraction? Or something worse?" Elijah stepped out of the shadows. "She's not yours to question." Guns cocked all around the camp, but Pike waved a hand, amused. "There he is. I told the boys you'd come." Elijah ignored the rifles aimed at him. "I'm not here to bargain." "No," Pike smirked, "because I've got a fine offer. Hand over Red Hawk, and she walks. I do not know where he is." Pike stood, kicked the chair aside. "Then you're both dead." That night, before the duel, Pike allowed Elijah one final word with Maya. They spoke under torchlight, guarded by 2 men with rifles. Maya's wrists were raw, her lip bled, but her eyes still held fire. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "I always was stubborn." "They'll kill you." Elijah smiled faintly. "You think this is new for me?" She leaned forward, gripping his hands. "I promised you something once. That I'd do anything, just don't leave me." She paused, breath catching. "I meant it then, I mean it now. Just live, please. I don't want you to die for me." Elijah's eyes softened. He touched her cheek, his thumb brushing away dirt. "I never lived at all. Not until I pulled you out of that snow." She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. He leaned in, forehead resting against hers. "I'll keep my word. I will not leave you, not again." The duel was held at dawn. The whole camp gathered around the main street of the ruined town, a dusty stretch between 2 crumbling buildings. Elijah stood on one end. Pike stood at the other. No seconds, no rules, just the law of lead. The sun peeked over the mountains. The hawk screamed in the sky. Then they drew. 2 shots. A pause. Then a third. Elijah stumbled backward, a dark bloom spreading across his shirt. Pike collapsed, lifeless, a bullet through his chest. The crowd scattered. Maya ran to Elijah as he sank to his knees. "No, no, 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 stay with me." He groaned, gripping his side, blood seeping through his fingers. "You promised," she sobbed, pressing her hands to the wound. "You said you would not leave me again." "I am trying," he rasped. His eyes fluttered, the world fading in and out. Maya tore off part of her dress, pressed it hard against the wound. "You have to fight. You cannot die here, not like this." Elijah opened his mouth to speak but coughed, the taste of iron rising. She held his face in her hands. "Stay with me, Elijah. Look at me. Right here." He blinked, focused on her. And then, faint but firm, he whispered, I told you I would not leave. His breath slowed. The world tilted. But he did not fall. Not yet. The mountains turned green that spring. Elijah Hart spent 6 weeks in a cot, swaddled in silence and pain. The bullet from Tanner Pike had missed anything vital, but not by much. Fever gripped him, loosening only when Maya whispered old Comanche songs beside his bed. She fed him broth with shaking hands. She changed his bandages, soaked them in herbal mixtures. She stayed through every night. And slowly, he began to live again. News traveled quickly through Ash Creek and beyond. Elijah Hart had killed Tanner Pike. That he had crossed warpaths for the daughter of Red Hawk. Some called him foolish, others whispered he was in love. But none denied it. The ghost who had once lived on the mountain had finally chosen to stay. One morning, as the sky turned pale over the ridge, Elijah stood for the first time on the porch. The world was quiet. Then he saw them. A dozen Comanche riders emerged at the tree line. Silent, still. At their head stood Red Hawk. He carried no rifle, no spear. Only age, dignity, and something heavy in his eyes. Maya stepped outside, her breath caught. Father and daughter stared at each other. Time suspended between them. No words, no movement. Then Red Hawk stepped forward, slowly, and pulled from a leather pouch a carved bone pendant, an eagle, smoothed by years of wear. He held it out. Elijah stepped down, took it. Red Hawk nodded, not in submission, not in thanks, but in understanding. Then he turned, and by dusk they were gone. But what they left behind was more permanent than tracks in the snow. Midlife, peace. 2 years passed. Willow Creek, once a place of ghosts, now bloomed with rows of beans, corn, and red-petaled roses that Elijah tended by hand. The cabin was rebuilt, sturdier than before. The barn stood strong again. Maya had opened a schoolhouse by the river, 3 benches, a chalkboard, and a fire stove. Children from scattered ranches and tribes came to learn. Some days she taught in English, others in Comanche. She made sure they remembered both. Elijah rarely went far now. He spent his mornings tending the orchard and his evenings on the porch, with a pencil in hand, journaling in silence, encouraged by Maya's gentle insistence. One dusky evening, a small girl with braids came running up the hill. "Papa," she cried. Elijah smiled as she launched into his lap. Her name was Lila. She had her mother's eyes and his quiet way of watching the world. She smelled like dust, pine, and sunflowers. "Easy now," Elijah chuckled. "You nearly knocked the porch over." She giggled, curled against his chest. Maya stood in the doorway, watching with that smile that still made him forget every scar. She joined them, sitting beside Elijah, her arm wrapped around his shoulder. He held his daughter, held Maya's hand, and looked out over the land he once believed would bury him in grief. Now it breathed, with color, with joy, with love. That night, long after Leela had fallen asleep and the house had grown still, Elijah opened his worn journal and wrote by firelight. "You once said, 'Please don't leave me here. I'll do anything you want.' But what you did not know is that you had already given me everything. You saved me from silence, from grief, from a life already buried. I thought I pulled you from the snow, but truly, you brought me out of the cold." He closed the book, leaned back in his chair, and let the quiet settle in. There was nothing left to run from. Only something to hold. Thank you for riding with us through snow, sorrow, and salvation, the journey of Elijah and Maya, where love didn't come easy, but came real.